You ever notice how everyone in a small town knows your business, especially when you're broke, a little weird, and spend your nights crawling through junkyards, talking to rusted junk like it's a gold mine? That was me, Mason Briggs, the punchline at every bar, every hardware store, every gossip circle in town. Folks would see me dragging home busted refrigerators or broken lawnmowers and shake their heads. Poor Mason, lost his marbles after his old man died. They'd whisper. I got so used to it, their laughter became the background noise of my life. But you know what? Sometimes you take all those little humiliations, all that doubt, and you weld it into something nobody sees coming in the world, just for a minute, stops laughing. It was just before dawn one of those mornings where the air hangs thick with dew and regret when I wiped grease off my hands, staring down at what looked like a Frankenstein monster of an engine on the cracked floor of my shed. I mean, it was ugly. Scrap metal, part from a busted fridge, some mangled bolts, even pieces of snowmobile that hadn't seen snow since Reagan was president. None of it belonged together. But I tell you, to me, that pile of junk was hope raw, desperate hope. Most nights, after a shift at Dale's Discount Garage where they paid just enough to keep the lights on in my trailer, I'd stumble home, crack open a can of beans for dinner, and tinker away in my shed under a flickering bulb. The neighbors call me Midnight Mason crazy, but harmless. Even my old boss said, "Son, you'll never build anything but disappointment." Maybe he was right. I used to dream bigger back when my dad, Vietnam vet, gearhead, my hero, was around. We'd lay on the hood of his Chevy, listening to NASCAR on a static AM radio, talking about building an engine that could outpace the wind. After he passed, it felt like my dreams went into the ground with him. But that morning, as sunlight cracked through the splintered walls of my shed, I stood there with calloused hands and whispered to the cold steel, "Let's give them something to talk about, old man." No blueprint, no plan, just a promise I made at my dad's grave to build something that mattered. I grabbed the pull cord, held my breath. First try to engine cough like a sick dog. Second try it sputtered. I almost gave up, but one more pull and man, it roared. Not like any engine I'd ever heard, deep, defiant, almost alive. I'll admit, tears burned my eyes. Rusty, my dog, barked like he was cheering me on. There was no crowd, no applause. Just me, a broke mechanic in a ratty hoodie, and a miracle made from junk. Later that day, eating cold beans with Rusty in my lap, I heard tires crunching outside. Figured it was a repo man or maybe someone needing a cheap fix, but now it pulled up as a jet black pickup, polished so clean it looked like it belonged in another world. The driver stepped out, aviators, cowboy boots, radiating confidence like he owned the place. He didn't even introduce himself before he said, "Heard an engine this morning." Not just any engine. Something different. I blinked, wondering if I lost my mind, but then he stuck out his hand. "Name's Carter West. Westline Motorsports." Yeah, that Westline Motorsports NASCAR royalty. I almost laughed in his face, but he wasn't joking. He walked straight into my shed, took off his sunglasses, and started poking around like he'd just stumbled on buried treasure. "You build this alone?" he asked. "No team, no funding." I nodded, still half convinced this was some elaborate prank. Carter started firing questions: what parts, what process, how the hell I got it to run. When I handed him my coffee-stained notes, he didn't scoff or roll his eyes like everyone else. He just studied them, lips moving as he did the math. "You know what you've got here?" he said finally, looking up with an intensity that made my heart skip. "This could change everything." And just like that, the world shifted. Carter ran a few quick simulations on his laptop, right there in the dirt, looked at the numbers, and his eyebrows shot up. "Mason, if these specs hold up, you're sitting on a revolution." I felt dizzy. I'd spent so many years getting ignored that I barely knew how to breathe when someone actually believed in me. Next thing I know, Carter's offering me a spot at Westline Resources Engineers, a shot at making this engine the next big thing in NASCAR. He told me, "It won't be easy. The industry's brutal. But I started in a place just like this. You remind me of me, and I want to give you the chance nobody ever gave me. My whole life, I've been waiting for a moment like this, and now it was here. I was terrified. But hope has a way of drowning out fear." "I'm in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The next few weeks were a blur. One minute I'm eating beans with my dog. Next, I'm surrounded by engineers in crisp uniforms, standing under lights so bright they make you feel naked. My engine Emmy ugly, beautiful creation became the center of a whirlwind. Late nights, endless tests, doubts nipping at my heels every step. More than once, I thought about quitting. What if I screw this up? What if I let Carter down? But every morning, Rusty would nudge me awake, and I'd remember that lonely garage where it all began. Carter called me into the main lab one night, said, "Tomorrow we put your engine to the test. Make or break." I barely slept, mind racing with possibilities. The next day, sun rising over the test track, I stood by the car as the engine was bolted into a frame so sleek it looked like a rocket ship. Every sponsor, every big shot in racing was there. No room for mistakes. "You ready, Mason?" Carter asked. I took a breath. "Let's light it up." The engine thundered to life raw, wild, perfect. The car shot down the track, lap after lap, blowing away every expectation. The numbers coming in were unreal. Efficiency through the roof, speed that made veterans gasp. I could feel the whole world watching, waiting for me to fail. But I didn't. Not this time. After the final lap, as I climbed out of the car, the crowd exploded. Reporters swarmed, engineers cheered, and Carter, well, he just grinned, that "I told you so" kind of grin. "You did it, Mason. You changed the game." It was a victory, sure, but I knew this was just the start. NASCAR is a ruthless world. They don't like outsiders, and now every rival team wanted to know how I'd done it, how a nobody from nowhere had just embarrassed them. A few days later, a NASCAR executive called for a meeting. I walked into that boardroom shaking, but I answered every question, showed my work, stood my ground. By the end, they agreed to let my engine compete in the coming season. For the first time in decades, someone like me, a backyard mechanic, had a seat at the big table. Race day was electric crowds roaring, cameras everywhere. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, thinking of all the nights I nearly gave up. The race started, and man, it was brutal. Midway, a hotshot tried to run me off the track. Guess he thought he could scare the new kid. But you know what? I held steady, reclaimed the lead, and as that checkered flag waved, I crossed the line first. The crowd went nuts. I climbed out, sweaty, exhausted, overwhelmed, and for a second, I just stood there, soaking it all in. Carter hugged me, Rusty barked, and, for once, nobody was laughing at Mason Briggs. The press called it a miracle. Other teams started dissecting every bolt of my engine, trying to figure out the secret. I knew there'd be backlash politics, jealousy, maybe even sabotage. But as the sun set over that roaring track, I realized I'd done it. I'd turned junk into gold, heartbreak into hope. Now, the real fight was just beginning. Because in this world, when you upset the system fights back. You know what I mean? So here's the real question. Folks, when the underdog finally gets a shot, is the world ready to let him win? Or what does the game just change the rules? Comment boulot? Tell me, is it right for NASCAR to give a nobody a chance? Does innovation belong to the rich, or can a broke mechanic rewrite the story? Let's hear it. What's your take on justice, underdogs, and the American dream?